Friday after our show, well, we talked about it during the show, 30-year-old Tommy Rees became the offensive coordinator in Alabama, and now Kevin Steele, age 64. So 30-year-old offensive coordinator and 64-year-old Kevin Steele, who now comes to Tuscaloosa with his third chapter of coaching with Nick Saban. When you heard Kevin Steele was the new defensive coordinator in Tuscaloosa, your first thoughts was?
Gross. I mean, if I'm an Alabama fan, I know there's familiarity between the two. This is the third stint with Nick Saban and Kevin Steele. But this is a guy, to me, that's lost his fastball. I mean, watching Miami was a complete disaster this past year, but everybody talks about Tyler Van Dyke and how bad the offense was. The defense wasn't any good. They gave up 28 points per game.
Here's how I would qualify it. Tommy Rees, which we talked a lot about Friday on our extra show, I would say that's an interesting hire, right? Interesting. I would say Kevin Steele is puzzling. Puzzling to me, Kevin Steele.
Gross and puzzling are the two words you came.
Well, to the point that and Aaron Suttles will talk to us about this later, and he'll have more insight than me, but to the point, and this is just pure speculation for me, I have no earthly idea, but to the point that I got to think this is a holding spot to see what happens with Jeremy Pruitt.
Well, that's what I said last night in a little video, that we'll see what Jeremy Pruitt's role is on this staff, if he's on the staff at all, Brown, so that's a great point. But I want to go back to gross and puzzling, because when he was the defensive coordinator at Auburn, everyone loved this guy.
Oh, yeah. And that was, 2017?
Well, that's not that long ago.
That's 5 years.
Yeah. So you think Kevin Steele has forgotten what the X's and O's look like?
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying this is a recycled job. I agree with Brown. I don't think it is Kevin Steele long-term. I think it is, let's figure this out. And whether it's a placeholder for Jeremy Pruitt once he gets cleared, or look, we got in a situation where I thought this Pruitt thing was going to happen. It's not going to happen. I need a stopgap for 1 year.
Yeah. Well, see,
that's Kevin Steele.
It has been my belief all along that Jeremy Pruitt will have a role on this coaching staff, whether it's an analyst or what. So what if he is doing a lot of the heavy lifting behind the scenes, Brownie, and Kevin Steele is just calling the shots on game day?
I mean, I don't think just calling the shots on game day, you make that sound so minimal, like, he's just calling shots on game day. That's no big deal. I mean, that's the most important part of your job.
It is.
That's what you're doing on game day. I don't know. I'm still underwhelmed by that.
Well, I'm going to tell you some of the things I like about Kevin Steele.
All right.
He doesn't like to overcomplicate things. Like, he usually is one of those guys that tries to, I don't want to say keep it basic, but he likes to let his athletes hunt.
Well, he should have overcomplicated it at Miami last year. They were awful.
Well, I mean, we're going to at least sit here and address the fact that we think Alabama's athletes are better than Miami's athletes, right?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
Yeah, but Miami has played in the ACC.
Yeah, and got shelled by teams like Middle Tennessee State. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
It was an awful year for Kevin Steele.
It was. It was a bad year for Kevin Steele in Miami. So puzzling and gross. Anything else you want to add on Kevin Steele?
I mean, I'm surprised. Yeah, puzzling is a good word. I was saying gross just because of the few Alabama fans I talked to weren't excited about this. And, Nick Saban, his hires, some have been head scratching, but you trust Nick Saban. That's why I think this Tommy Rees thing will end up working out. We'll see. I mean, Kevin Steele will end up working out. It's not like this defense is going to take a nosedive.
Yeah, I mean, it just felt like it's the night before the dance. You didn't have a date. So you went to a date you thought you could get, which is Kevin Steele, who's thrilled to get out of Miami and come back and coach that better roster.
Or even maybe a better analogy is last girl at the bar.
Yeah, I mean.
Because I don't know what else was out there.
Yeah, I mean, it just feels like you went, all right, I know Kevin will say yes, let's ask him, and boy, we'll hope we sort out this Jeremy Pruitt thing and get him on the field.
Miami is looking for two coordinators now. They're expected to replace Kevin Steele with the analyst Charlie Strong, who was recently in Tuscaloosa as well. We've got a ton of reaction from you guys on this subject, and it is one of those polarizing subjects. Some Alabama fans like it. Most do not. I was with a group of Auburn fans on the golf course with our friends at the Meadows when the news came down, and their reaction was they sort of liked it. They sort of liked that Alabama had Kevin Steele because they felt like there was some negative recruiting going on when he was at Auburn because of his age. and they wanted to see how Alabama was going to have to play that now on the recruiting trail, that your defensive coordinator is 64. A few years ago, he was too old when he was in Auburn. Now, what are you going to say on the recruiting trail now? And a lot of them felt like that Kevin had lost his fastball by the time he was leaving Auburn as well. So the Auburn folks I was around did not seem like that was a scary hire from the Auburn perspective.
Well, there was a time where Kevin Steele was keeping Auburn football afloat. I mean, Gus Malzahn's offense was awful, and they were resting wholly on that defense, and he kept them in so many games. But I do think by the end, we had discussed it had started to slip on him a little bit. And I think on the recruiting trail as well is where it had started to slip on Kevin Steele. And then what he's done post-Auburn it hasn't engendered any more confidence in Kevin Steele for me.
Here's the reaction from you guys, just a few of them, and we'll get to deeper reaction from you guys later on. The Duke of Northport, which is a great little hamlet to be Duke of, I'll go ahead and tell you.
Sure.
The Duke of Northport. I'm okay with it as long as Pruitt comes in as an analyst and can be the DC in waiting. Now, see if you get a theme here. Our buddy Michael, who shows up in the Vulcan Tire and Automotive chat room for great locations, and also on Twitter. Curious to see what big-name analyst comes in. Hopefully Pruitt. You got a theme yet?
Yeah.
I can keep going. There's a lot of Pruitts tied with this Kevin Steele.
I think what would have been interesting, we did that poll question on Todd Grantham. It's been 2 weeks now. And how overwhelming it was on Alabama fans did not want anything to do with Todd Grantham. If we would have done this last week, just poll question, Todd Grantham or Kevin Steele?
I think Steele might have still won that one.
No, I do too, but I think it'd be close.
It'd be close, but I think Steele would have won. I think most
it's-
people would have taken the scene of Kevin Steele versus the scene of what you got from Todd
I
Grantham.
think it's
gone-
55-45.
You would have gone headline STILL STEELE. Still.
Still. Yes, that would have been my headline.
Clint says, I think I read Steele needs 1 year for Alabama retirement, stays a year, and then in comes Jeremy Pruitt. I mean, there's a
Well, you're
theme.
getting a lot of
There's
Pruitt,
a theme through 100 of these.
Oh, I'm
Brown.
sure. But as Royal Payne points out, don't forget Austin Armstrong, who was the coordinator they hired from Southern Miss, but he's still a young guy. I have encountered some Alabama fans that are hopeful that this is a way for Kevin Steele to take a young guy under his wings and say, I know you know what you're doing. Let me show you how it's done in the Southeastern Conference. Because God knows I've coached for enough teams in the Southeastern Conference. I ought to know how it's done in the Southeastern Conference. I mean, Kevin Steele has been all over the place. So, if this is his ability to allow Austin Armstrong to mature a little bit under him, it may never be Jeremy Pruitt. Maybe it's Austin Armstrong next year.
Do you think Kevin is old enough to call it the Southern Conference instead of the Southeastern Conference?
Let me tell you how I stopped Tulane back in the day. It's a big conference game for us.
Listen, Sewanee back in the day.
We went out there and greased the track so their train couldn't stop.
Yeah, his first interview, he actually probably took a train, right?
Okay, honey, I'm going to go see if I can get that head coaching job.
I wonder, do you know how many jobs he's had, how many different schools he's worked for?
I think 11.
And all, now this is not just SEC, this is all different schools.
I think it's 11
I'm going to count them.
D1 programs.
Well, who did we have the other day that was at 15 stops? Was that Todd Grantham? No.
Oh, who was that?
It was the player. It was the guy that came in at quarterback.
Oh, yeah, Josh Johnson.
Josh Johnson.
Yeah.
15 different NFL teams.
So 10 stops total, not counting the Carolina Panthers, 10 college stops. But this is his third at Alabama, and he had 2 at Tennessee as well. So, I mean, depending on how you want to count those. But 10 different college teams this guy's worked for. I mean, that's a lot. Actually, 3 separate stops at Tennessee. So he's had 3 different stops at Tennessee, 3 different stops at Alabama. That's how long Kevin Steele has been coaching football.
Well, that tells you he's a chemistry guy, man. He works well with any staff.
I
man.
guess so.
Blends in nicely.
I mean, he hasn't owned a house very long. I bet his real estate agent loves him.
I remember it was just a few years ago that the powers that be at Auburn, the money people, the boosters, wanted this guy as their head coach.
Which would have been a horrifically bad hire.
Yeah, he's one of the worst head coaches in the history of college football.
His time at Baylor was disastrous. But Auburn dodged a bullet on that one, man. Dodged a bullet on those people
Really
that just
did.
wanted Kevin Steele to be a placeholder as a head coach. We're talking about him placeholder as a defensive coordinator. A lot of people just wanted, hey, work us through a couple of years, get us back headed in the right direction, and we'll go get a good young coach.